celebrating 48 years on the air. Award-winning Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, California's Prop 12 putting doubts in the minds of pork producers. In Southern Gardening, Eddie introduces us to a delightful little guy called Turk's cat. In the markets, Zach and the Maples brothers chatting it up on the latest WASDE report. And in our feature, a water quality program that could actually help farmers make more money. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. This episode is our 2400th show since we went on the air way back in 1977. This week, Prop 12 back in the news. California's controversial law on farm animal confinement, which now applies to animals raised outside California but sold there. Even so, there's a bit of uncertainty in the other 49 states. Farm Week has reported on that previously. Californians consume 15% of pork but produce only 1%. Should producers elsewhere comply with the new, more expensive standards to help meet demand? Colleen Bradford-Krantz has more in this extended report.
Proposition 12, the controversial California law that dictates how much floor space sows need if pork from their offspring is to be sold in California, doesn't appear to have had an impact on how many Midwest hog farms operate. At least not yet. Experts say the reason may be simple: the timing. Once the dust settled around several legal challenges by pork producers, the survival of Prop 12 ended up coinciding with a downturn in hog prices. Few hog farmers in the heartland, especially smaller independent producers, may be in a sound financial position to remodel or construct buildings that comply with the new measure, even if they or their packing partners wanted to sell uncooked pork in California.
Most of the time when I hear farmers tell me about a Prop 12 conversion, it's usually a site or two. Again, it's usually an older site that something needed to happen anyway, that they're choosing to do it. I think with the economic situation that farmers are facing, the conversion doesn't pay right now.
Considering that Californians consume about 15% of the nation's pork, it could be that enough of the largest pork processors made changes and may already be meeting that California demand. A University of California at Davis agricultural economics professor says this idea is reinforced by what appears to be a possible leveling off of pork prices following an initial spike in the state's grocery stores.
We observed prices in supermarkets in California and outside of California. And the products were always available starting in October through March. There was no period where the supermarkets we were scraping were saying, oh, no pork this week. Prices are high in California in general. So pork chops were more expensive in California before Prop 12 and after, but they seemed to be especially high during this adjustment period.
Although the court challenges to the new measure appear to be settled following a May 2023 Supreme Court ruling upholding the new rules, there is some discussion about including language in the next farm bill to limit measures like Prop 12.
I'm not sure we've settled out yet. There's still enough stuff going on, and it just has taken a long time, and it's partly because of the legal cases taking so long. It just made it so uncertain for producers, and for that matter, the supermarkets and the restaurants and everybody else.
Sumner wonders if California voters would have been smarter to take the state taxpayer money that will be spent on defending and regulating Prop 12 and instead offered grants to pork producers.
We could have taken the money, it's roughly $300 million a year, and offered that to hog farmers, saying, here's $300 million that we're going to pass out to hog farmers if they will promise us they'll have compliant housing. It would have been about twice as many pigs, mother sows, that would have been in California housing if we would have done it that way.
Gene Gorley of Gorley Brothers Hog Farm in central Iowa says although they are stepping away from raising sows for unrelated reasons, they had already decided against making changes.
I've heard of most of the conversions going on in different regions of the country where either closer to California or just someone doing new buildings or things, which is very few in Iowa, I think. So, and it's just too cost expensive for us to try and do it.
Gorley pointed out that 85% of the nation's pork doesn't need to fit with Prop 12. So it's too big a financial risk to make changes to his operation if the demand is already nearly being met.
If all of a sudden it exceeds that demand and the packer processor says, oh, we don't need your pigs anymore, okay, now I'll probably go bankrupt because I made that investment. And so it's kind of hard to know what that line is and who needs to do it and who's going to change. And the investment is so substantial that, yeah, you better be guaranteed with a contract of some sort. And that's the challenge, is just getting that cost recovery payment from a processor.
In other news, a look back at the impact of Hurricane Francine on the southeast and on fires raging in the west, prompting the USDA to spend billions on a plan to protect communities in the path. Peter Tubbs has this report.
The remains of Hurricane Francine continue to dump moisture on the southeast. When it made landfall in Louisiana on Wednesday, it was a Category 2 storm, delivering winds of 100 miles per hour and 8 inches of rain in New Orleans. Across Louisiana, 350,000 homes lost power. Both Louisiana and Mississippi have declared states of emergency. Some of the areas hit are still recovering from 2021's Hurricane Ida.
Ida tore this field up and tore her back house up, so we didn't come out, you know. We still trying to get everything straight with FEMA, restore Louisiana for a place to have a home again, and it's costing me money I don't have.
Residents of the region were warned of a possible 10-foot storm surge. In California, wildfires in the mountains east of Los Angeles destroyed dozens of homes and forced thousands to evacuate. The bridge fire is burning out of control and has scorched over 50,000 acres in Los Angeles County. In Orange County, the airport fire has consumed over 23,000 acres, about 36 square miles, and fire crews have only been able to contain about 5% of the inferno. Cooler weather may help firefighters in their quest to contain all of the blazes. In an attempt to prevent out-of-control events like these, the USDA announced a $3.2 billion wildfire crisis strategy, a plan to safeguard communities that interface with wildlands. The goal is to reduce the wildfire risk in 559 communities across the country.
Now, these resources are going to allow us to work with states, local governments, tribes, and nonprofit organizations working to promote healthier forests throughout this 14-state area and within these projects.
Right now, according to the National Interagency Fire Center, there are 56 large wildfires actively burning in the U.S. Those fires have burned more than 2 million acres so far.
On the lighter side, this week in our Southern Gardening segment, a new one, at least for us, not for Eddie Smith. It's called Turk's Cap, and apparently it's a perennial shrub that can handle just about anything. Here's Eddie.
Today, I'm back in Poplarville, Mississippi, admiring a native flowering perennial that is a favorite among hummingbirds and other pollinators. Let's look at this plant. Turk's Cap is a captivating and resilient perennial plant native to the southern United States and Mexico. This plant boasts luxuriant, deep green leaves, 4 to 6 inches in diameter, that look like baseball mitts and provide a lush backdrop for its striking flowers. Its flowers, with their unusual shape and vivid hue, add a touch of exotic allure. The blooms are a vibrant scarlet red, their unique form resembling a Turkish turban, which gives the plant its common name. The petals remain partially closed, creating a distinctively spiraled appearance that is both eye-catching and attractive to pollinators, such as hummingbirds and butterflies. Turk's cap can grow to impressive heights of 6 to 10 feet with a spread of 4 to 8 feet, making it a substantial presence in any garden. It thrives in a range of lighting conditions, from full sun to partial shade, and is drought tolerant, adapting well to various soil types, including sandy, loamy, and clay soils. Turk's cap's resilience and versatility make it an ideal choice for gardeners seeking to add long-lasting beauty to their landscapes. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We will take a short break, but stick around. Coming up, a water program that's good for the environment and helps farmers make more money. It's a certification program in Minnesota that incentivizes farmers to protect their most valuable resource, water. Of course, farming is a balancing act, but this program helps farmers optimize their operations in a way that they usually wind up more profitable. And that's a win-win in everyone's book. And Encore, farmers taking water quality to the next level. That's coming up. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. The latest WASDE dropped, but
didn't make much of an impact, and we'll talk about it. But first, the numbers. What were the week's biggest gains and losses? And then, this month's WASDE report. What did it have to say? And finally, two extension economists talked to us about the WASDE's effects. So, markets closed the week in the green, row crops with one exception, up while livestock split. Let's take a look. The week's biggest gain? Wheat up 28.25 cents, a near 5% increase from the previous week. The week's biggest loss? Lumber down near 17 bucks, an over 3.25% decrease from the previous week. So, this month's World Agricultural Supply and Demand report released from the USDA and didn't really make waves. More on that in a bit. The biggest takeaways had to do with grain yields, especially in soybeans and corn. Here's Bella Bingham with what it had to say.
U.S. wheat outlook unchanged from last month. Season average farm price remains $5.70 per bushel. Global wheat supplies up due to higher stocks offsetting lower production, which is still at a record level. Consumption up mostly in feed and residual use. Trade also up and ending stocks predicted to rise as well. U.S. corn stocks lower due to exports and ethanol production. Crop production projected up 39 million bushels compared to last month due to yield increases. Season average farm price $4.10 per bushel. Global corn production forecast down due to declines in the EU, Ghana, Russia, and Serbia, partially offset by increases for Tanzania and Canada. Imports raised for the EU, Mexico, India, and Thailand, ending stocks down 1.8 million tons. U.S. rice supplies up due to higher stocks and imports offsetting lower production. Average all rice yield down 35 pounds per acre. Total domestic and residual use down slightly but still at a record high. Season average farm price $15.60 per hundredweight. Global rice supplies up slightly, mostly due to stocks and production in India. Consumption also up while ending stocks projected down slightly. U.S. soybean stocks down due to increased crush. 2024-25 production projected down 3 million bushels, with crush and exports unchanged. Ending stocks projected down 10 million bushels. Season average farm price unchanged at $10.80 per bushel. Global soybean production up about 500,000 tons on higher crops in Paraguay and Canada. Trade increased about 182 million tons on higher exports for Paraguay and imports for Argentina. Ending stocks increased slightly. U.S. beef production up on higher cow slaughter and heavier weights. Pork production also up due to more slaughter but lower weights. Broiler production raised on more chicks placed in third and fourth quarters. Turkey production unchanged and egg production lower due to less laying flocks. U.S. milk production forecast lower for 2024-25 due to lower cow inventories and less milk per cow. Forecasts for cheese, butter, non-fat dry milk, and whey are all raised. All milk price forecast for 2025 raised to $23.45 per hundredweight. U.S. cotton stocks and domestic use unchanged. Production down 600,000 bales due to less yields for upland cotton in the Southwest. Exports down as well. Season average farm price unchanged at 66 cents per pound. Global cotton production lower due to smaller crops in the U.S., India, and Pakistan. Consumption down as well due to less decreases in Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Turkey. World ending stocks down as a result.
Now that you have the context, what did the experts say? I spoke with Drs. Will and Josh Maples of MSU Extension to get their thoughts, and, well, didn't seem that this particular WASDE made much of an impact on prices at all. In fact, it was more of a backing up of things already known. However, there was at least one major takeaway.
One big takeaway is they did bump up corn yields a little bit. This was kind of surprising to the market. Nobody really expected corn yields to bump. Didn't really expect them to go down either, though. So that carry out a little bit higher into next year. They lowered the average farm price by 10 cents on corn. It'll be really interesting as we keep going into this year, because we talked a lot about earlier in the spring about how wet the spring was. That's when, at harvest is when we will really see any yield impacts from that wet spring. So as producers get out there in the Midwest, start harvesting corn, it'll be interesting to see what they do with the corn yields next year in the WASDE.
I can see that they're reflecting what the latest crop progress report has said, which is that a lot of these crops are not in as good of condition as they seemed just a few months ago.
Yeah, so we expect crop conditions to come down a little bit as we get closer to harvest. That's a pattern we see every year, is they will get rated a little bit lower. But for all intents and purposes, it's going to be a bumper soybean and corn crop out there this year.
I've been hearing that myself too. So how does it look from the cattle and livestock side on the WASDE report?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me, Zach, is this continued increase in beef production compared to what we expected coming into this year. So if you think back, coming into 2024, we expected beef production to be quite a bit lower, 5% or so lower than 2023. USDA has continued to bump that number up, and it happened again in this latest report. Higher slaughter weights for fed cattle, and then also increased cull cow slaughter, or at least higher than expected cull cow slaughter, I should say. Those two put together, we're going to be really close to 2023 levels in terms of how much beef we produce this year, which is amazing given the tighter supplies of cattle that we've talked about so many times on this show.
So the biggest takeaway from the WASDE report for both of y'all, what do you think, how big of an effect do you think it had on the markets?
On the row crop side, this it's not usually a big market mover. Whenever we start getting harvest going in the Midwest on corn and soybeans next coming months, those reports will carry a lot more weight to the markets.
How about on the cattle side?
Same on the cattle side. Not a huge shocker on anything here. So, I mean, I think it tells us more, or confirms a little bit more of what we already thought was happening. I don't see it being a huge market mover for this particular month.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. We're in a strange time of year with harvest underway, but still too early to really tell what our yields will be. Mike?
Thanks, Zach. Farmers and ranchers who depend on the Colorado River have been told to drastically cut their usage on their own, or the federal government says it will mandate the cuts for them. Conservation is one part of the water equation, quality is the other, especially in Minnesota. Once again, Peter Tubbs has more.
Farming is often a balancing act between environmental sustainability and financial viability. On one side, you are out to make money, and on the other, you are protecting your most valuable economic resource. The Minnesota Water Quality Certification Program was begun in 2015 to help incentivize farmers to protect one of their valuable resources, water. Almost 1,200 farms have been certified, covering nearly 1 million acres of Minnesota farmland. Certification also deems an operation in compliance with any new water quality legislation for a decade. The regulatory certainty has become an attraction for beginning the water certification program. Brad Redlin is the Water Quality Certification Program Manager for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
That's really an insurance policy for those 10 years to know they're either going to be in compliance with it after those 10 years or they have 10 years to make any tweaks that they might have to meet some new law.
The Water Quality Certification Program reviews every part of a farming operation that might affect the water leaving a farm, from tillage practices to manure management. The surprise finding is that farms that fulfill the parameters required by the water quality certification are consistently more profitable.
When you do site-specific risk assessment, response, and analysis, you're maximizing your performance on the farm. We have these licensed accredited agronomist conservation planners that go out and work with the farmer throughout the entire operation, every step of the way, maximize their performance. It's going to be more profitable. It's no different than any other industry or any other application of management to a production challenge. If you maximize that performance, the profit's going to be there, and that's what's been shown to happen.
The study's authors emphasize that being certified is not the key to improved profitability, but rather managing a farming operation at a level that would qualify a farm for certification is an indicator of other work being done. Keith Olander is Executive Director of Ag-Centric, a state of Minnesota program that bridges the gap between agriculture and education.
To become water quality certified, you have to step through the process, which means that I am watching all of the practices on my fields and within my livestock. Those are things that maybe we take for granted in some of the farming operations, but it isn't maybe uniform in practice. But it tends to bring those out to say that helps us become more profitable. So yes, I'm a little leery to just say, you're water quality certified now, and you're going to be more profitable. But undoubtedly, that cohort after over 4 years and starting to get over 100 farms, it's really hard to argue that.
The fact that the water quality certified managers are still showing to be more profitable than even their cohorts within this financial service provision process that the Farm Business Management Program provides, that it just more clearly delineates the fact that what certification values is what's profitable.
Producers who market directly to consumers use their water quality certification to differentiate themselves from others in the market.
Water quality certification is an enhancement to your farm over the long term. I think it's a bold statement, but it's a fair statement that we can make. So the consumer can draw back a little confidence to say we're doing both of those in a fair way, that we're supporting farmers to be viable economically and environmentally sustainable.
For Todd Stencil, who farms in Waseca County, Minnesota, reducing tillage passes, one of the requirements to get certified, lowers input costs and creates a higher performing soil.
Bottom line, the number one would be time saving. The amount of labor savings and fuel savings is significant.
To achieve certification, Stencil made adjustments to the tiles on the edges of his fields. He installed low-velocity water quality inlets that slow the access to the tile once ponding occurs, reducing the amount of soil that is washed down the tile, and keeping the trash from harvest on the field.
It was a fairly simple process. I had inquired about it through the NRCS and our local soil and water, got the paperwork, kind of contemplated it, and then with the help of the NRCS, was encouraged to apply for it. On my particular farm, because of the ridge till and strip till I was already using, It was actually very simple to implement the different things they recommended. All I had to do was change a few of those, prove the paperwork on my current practices, and I was in.
Water qualified certified farms tend to have more livestock than the average farm in Minnesota, which may require a higher level of management. Access to manure reduces input costs while also improving soil chemistry. That practice of examining every dollar earned and spent on the farm and determining the unique best practices for each producer often improves the profitability compared to neighboring farms.
I don't want anybody to say, if I go get water quality certified, I'm going to make more money. I don't think that that's the case. I think it's always the idea that if I'm going to be a successful business, I got to think like a successful business. And certainly what water quality has pointed out is that those people that are certified think like successful business owners. But that just comes back to this management of soils, the environment, and that falls back into my economics.
Sage advice. Do the work to get certified, and it just might grow your bottom line. Well, next time on Farm Week, the beginning of my two-part special report, Balancing Act.
It is a balancing act, the stewardship of land in the Mississippi Delta that serves to feed hungry Americans and yet is also a habitat for hungry birds flying south for the winter.
At the same time, it's also an example of how one simple change just might be all it takes to meet everyone's needs. Balancing Act, my special report, begins next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching.